See if I can find a video. All right, if you're watching this video and listening, I don't know what happened to the original video I recorded, but it didn't record any of this stuff. So you can pause it and look at the notes, but I will try to find my video from a different year and upload it so that you can hear me explain it. The last section that we're doing today is solving questions like, and it's way up there, graph y equals cosine 2x. I'm not going to use this graph. It takes a long time to do it. I'm going to show you on Desmos what graphing cosine 2x would look like, and then I'm going to explain how to find it algebraically with equations. Okay, so graphing just cosine x, we've done that before. If I'm solving the equation, I'm looking for the x-intercepts. I'm looking for when the y value is 0. And we have two x-intercepts, pi over 2, 3 pi over 2. That's just cosine x. That's normal cosine x. But if I were to change the b value to 2, what's happening? Wait, I went really fast. What's happening as I go from 1 to 2? What happened to the graph when I went from 1 to 2? It shrunk which way? Horizontally. It like went in horizontally. And after it shrunk from 0 to 2 pi, I now have 1, 2, 3, 4 x-intercepts. So what's happening is when it's just cosine 1x, a full cycle of cosine goes from 0 to 2 pi. One time around the circle, 0 to 2 pi. 2 answers. But when I go to cosine 2x, we now have 2 full cycles. We have 2 full cycles from 0 to 2 pi. So these second 2 points, the first 2 points, I think you might be able to figure out how I get them. The second 2 points, though, I'm going to show you how we get those as well visually. So I'm going to go back to when it's just cosine x. And the first 2 cycles of just cosine x, we've got pi over 2, 3 pi over 2, 5 pi over 2, and 7 pi over 2. That's 2 full cycles. That's not 0 to 2 pi, though. So when I shrink it down, can you remember pi over 2, 3 pi over 2, 5 pi over 2, 7 pi over 2? Can you remember those? Can you remember those? Why did I use 2 cycles? Do you know why I used 2 cycles? Okay, well, I'll talk about that when we go to the next one. So when I shrink it down from 0 to 2 pi, I now have pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4, 7 pi over 4. Do you see the numerators stayed the same? It was the denominators that did what? The denominators multiplied by 2. So I could think about that as maybe the entire pi over 4 or pi over 2 original pi over 2 or 3 pi over 2 multiplied by 1 over 2, 1/2, or divided by 2. What's happening is since there's 2 cycles when it's shrunk down, I had to get the first 4 answers. And after that, I had to divide by 2 to get over 4. What do you think is going to happen if I go to b equals 3? How many cycles do you think they're going to be? Intuition, throw out a number. 6? If b is 3, if I have cosine 3x. This is cosine 2x, where I have 2 full cycles. What do you think cosine 3x is going to give us? 3 or 6? 3 or 6. That's what I'm hearing the most of. And I hear a few other randoms. So I'm going to go to 3. And I'll just zoom in here so we can look at 0 to 2 pi. We've got 1 full cycle. We've got 2 full cycles. And we've got 3 full cycles. So what do you think this B is telling me? It's the number of cycles that fit between 0 and 2 pi. When I click on these, originally it was pi over 2, then it was pi over 4. What do you think this one might be? Any guesses? Pi over what? Yell out a number. 6? Boom, pi over 6. This one here was 3 pi over 2, then it was 3 pi over 4. What do you think this one's going to be? It was pi over 2. No, 3 pi, sorry. It was 3 pi over 2. Then it was 3 pi over 4. When I made the number 3, what do you think it's going to be? You think it's going to be 3 pi over 6? I mean, the answer is there. It's like dot right there. Why is it not 3 pi over 6? Oh, we reduced the fraction. This one here was 5 pi over 2. Then it was 5 pi over 3. What do you think it is now? 5 pi over 6? Yes, it is. This one over here was 7 pi over 2. Then it was 7 pi over 4. Now it's 7 pi over 6. What do you think would happen if I moved it to b equals 4? How many cycles? 4 cycles is the correct answer. If b equals 4, there will be 4 cycles. Here's my first cycle, second cycle, third cycle, fourth cycle. The first one was pi over 2. Then it was pi over 4. Then it was pi over 6. What do you think this one's going to be? Pi over 8? Yes, it is. So all of these should be over 8 unless they reduce. Those didn't reduce. Nope, 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 nope. Oop, went too far. But there's 8 answers. What if I go to b equals a half? Come on. B equals 1/2. How many cycles from 0 to 2 pi if b equals a half? Half a cycle. So the first number is pi over 2. Well, we might have to do that one on paper. All right, let's do it. So on paper, let's see what we do. So what we did was we decided that there's 2 cycles. How did I decide there was 2 cycles? There's a number 2 in front of the x. That's the saying we have 2 cycles. And then after we find all these points, we're going to multiply by 1/2, which is the same thing as divide by 2, either however you want to do it, same thing. So now what we're going to do is we're going to find the answers for the first cycle, but we're going to find for cosine x. We're not going to find for cosine 2x. We're going to find for cosine x when it equals 0. So our first cycle, why can't I spell that right? Our first cycle, we just saw it a million times. What were our first cycle ordered or angles? Participate so we get done. Pi over 2. What is our second one? 3 pi over 2. But then, because there's 2 cycles, I have a second cycle. To get the second cycle, that's the next 2 pi. So I'm actually going to add 2 pi to each of these first cycle answers. But in order to add pi with 2 pi, I have to have common denominators. So I'm actually going to add 4 pi over 2 because that is 2 pi. So if I add 4 pi over 2, I get 5 pi over 2. I get 7 pi over 2. And we just saw that happening. So this is 2 full cycles of cosine x. Now we need to shrink it down. So when we shrink it down, we're going to multiply all the denominators by 2. So we're going to multiply by half, or we're going to divide by 2. We're going to change all the denominators. And in order. Nope, I didn't multiply. Pi over 4, pi over 3 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4, 7 pi over 4. You guys just saw me do that on Desmos. When you get those written down, the next question is the last question I was trying to ask you, but not everybody got it. So now we're going to look at cosine 1/2 x, which I just showed you. So how many cycles are there? Half a cycle. So that means for cosine x equals 0, which is pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2, I'm only going to use half of this cycle. Which half do you think I should use? Like intuition. Which half? No, that's top of it's not a, like the right one or the left one? The pi over 2. We're going to use the first half. I'm not going to use that one. So we're going to take that, and that's our only cycle. So what do we do now? We have to multiply by what? You're going to multiply by 2 over 1. You're multiplying by the reciprocal of 1 over 2. So you're going to multiply by 2. Or you can divide by half if you want. So multiply that by 2. I get pi over 2 multiplied by 2. What do I get for my only answer? Pi. And that's what you guys saw me have on the screen. So these next ones, I'm not going to use the Desmos for. I'm just going to follow the directions we just kind of came up with. We're going to look at cosine 3x equals 1/2. So how many cycles? 3 cycles. And then after I do the 3 cycles, I'm going to multiply by what? I can't hear anybody. Who's talking? I can't even hear where the voice is coming from. You guys are so quiet. You're not a quiet bunch. Michaela, do you know? It is 1/3. Thank you. Next time, speak up. Okay, so we're looking at cosine x equals 1/2 for our cycles. This is going to be my first cycle. We've got 3 cycles. Where is cosine 1/2? Shivani? Pi over 3? The only place? So for cosine to be positive, it's in the first and fourth quadrant. So we've got pi over 3, and then we've got 5 pi over 3. Second cycle. I need to add 2 pi, but I need a common denominator of 3. So I'm really adding 6 pi over 3. So I'll get 7 pi over 3 and 11 pi over 3. Third cycle. Add another 2 pi, which is 6 pi over 3. So 13 pi over 3 and 17 pi over 3. Are those my answers? Garen, are these my answers? What do I need to do still? You had a 50-50 shot and you guessed, right?
I thought you were looking for those. That's what I said.
No, I'm always looking for explanation as well. Dominic, what do you think? Sorry, I didn't hear you answering. What did you say multiply by 3? Did you say multiply by 3?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not. I'm pointing to the right answer. You could divide by 3, which is the same as multiplying by 1/3. We're basically taking the denominator and making them into what? I did 6s in my last class and nobody said anything. God, I messed up so many times in that class. It is 9. You're right. I just must have been in a hurry. So pi over 9, 5 pi over 9, 7 pi over 9, 11 pi over 9, 13 pi over 9, and 17 pi over 9. You can double check yourself on Desmos. We're not doing that right now. Really, I just want to make sure that you understand this. I'm just going to do it with this one right here. I know it's a little late, but you guys aren't talking to me. If we were going to solve this for just cotangent, squared x equals 3, what would I have to do to solve that? Square root. So I'm going to get cotangent x equals plus minus square root 3. So where is cotangent x equal to plus or minus square root 3? How many answers will that be? 4 answers. What's the first one? Is it 30 or 60? Pi over 6 or pi over 3? It is pi over 6. So our first cycle is going to be pi over 6, 5 pi over 6, 7 pi over 6, 11 pi over 6. Cycle number 2, you're going to have to add on 12 pi over 6 because we're adding 2 pi with the common denominator. So now I've got 13 pi over 6, 17 pi over 6, 19 pi over 6, and 23 pi over 6. Third cycle, add another 12 pi over 6. 25 pi over 6. 29 pi over 6. 31 pi over 6. 35 pi over 6. Are we done? We are not done. Alex, what should I do? 1/3. So you're going to have 12 answers. I don't really want to rewrite those, so I invested in a nice eraser, a good pencil, so I don't have to rewrite them. Let's just change all my denominators. So if it was a 6, I'm dividing by 3, or I'm multiplying by 1/3, what is the denominator now going to be? It was 6. I'm not dividing the denominator by 3. I'm dividing the entire fraction by 3, or I'm multiplying the entire fraction by 1/3. What it'll be? What it'll be? 18. And all of these should fit between 0 and 2 pi. So if you get an answer that is over 2 pi, then you did something wrong. Again, you can check these on Desmos. You saw me doing it. I just didn't do it for all of them because of time. You have a worksheet. I am passing it out.